Make a count. Yes, we're good to go, Rochelle.
Okay, great. And it looks like we're going to lose Lark, so maybe we should power through so we can get to the voting items. So I don't know, Julie, do you want me to do introductions, or do you know who everyone is on today?
I can see who everyone is, so I'm good if you.
Okay, great. Then everyone received the minutes from February. Just to ask if there are any changes or corrections to those. I'll give you a minute to take a look. Does anybody have any corrections or changes to the minutes? Okay, hearing none, then those will be approved as submitted. And we will move on to our next item, which is the chairman's report. As to financials, we spent $1,254.62 in February, which, as you can see, leaves us with $40,759.01. Does anybody have any questions or comments about that? Okay. I had, it was last month, I believe, I sent a letter to the new county board chairman to ask for representation of a county board member to our meeting. I have not heard back from her yet. I am going to circle back around to her. I will say that at the time that I sent the letter, that was very near to when her husband had passed away. So I have not wanted to be sending follow-ups quite yet, but I am going to follow up on that so that we can try to get a representative back from the county board. So if there's nothing on that, we can move on to old business. And I am afraid I just came from another meeting. So Julia is going to do most of the talking here because I haven't had a chance to look at the notes again today. So Julia, do you want to start with youth focus groups?
Yeah, so that meeting we talked about at the last meeting, the meeting that I had with West Aurora's district to engage their group of youth that were convened basically to help with racial and ethnic issues within the school district. So we were going to pull them together and see if they could put together a presentation for our board. I have a meeting scheduled at the end of the month with the staff member that I was working with. So that's still kind of ongoing. Just for informational purposes, Family Service Association, one of our partners, has a junior board that they've convened. And so they're doing an event on anxiety and having like a conversation around like mental health and specifically focusing in on anxiety. I believe I sent that information out about that event, but I just wanted to put that out there that there are agencies, there's partners that are starting to engage youth. And so then with that, my follow-up is if anyone had any additional thoughts about getting youth together for like a youth advisory board or getting a youth member for our council, because I know that was an idea that was brought up at the last meeting. And if not, that's okay. We can keep, I know we're just starting.
Are we looking for somebody who has been court involved in some way, or just a youth that is interested in being a part of the board?
So I don't think that's been determined. I think that we were just kind of, so we have talked about like doing these generalized youth focus groups, and they wouldn't necessarily be youth that were involved in the system. I think historically, and like you probably remember this too, the barriers that we ran into with having youth that were currently court involved participating in such a thing. So I think we're still trying to sort that out. But I guess, is there interest in having either a youth member or a youth advisory committee? And
think that's something we've always strived for. I think that we should continue to do that. I think not only have we recognized the barriers of trying to get someone that was court involved, you also have to be careful that it's not someone that could potentially become court involved, I guess. My only push, and I say it every time we talk about these youth advisory groups, is that whoever we do, I will always push for somebody from a diverse background, maybe not necessarily that upper echelon student, because we want someone that can speak to what we're trying to gain more information to. So if we can get somebody from these anxiety groups, these mental health groups that you're talking about, that's a great pool, I think, of students that we could pull from, or from this group that you're talking about for ethnicity and diversity. As long as it's not all your student council leadership, you've got a good mix, then I think both of those are good opportunities.
Well, to your point, Latanya, from the last, I know you brought that up from the last meeting about this group of students from West Aurora, and that is when I meet with this staff member, I want to double check in on that. But I think I will say, like you said, they're all from diverse backgrounds. I just don't know in terms of academically where they're at either. So you still could have high achievers.
And don't misunderstand that I don't want high achievers. I just want people that has resources and doing really well, and people that don't have resources and not doing really well, so that we can get a broad picture as to what's going on with our youth in this area.
Yeah.
And with that too, are we gonna still continually meet virtually? Because I'm thinking, you know, in the past pre-pandemic, it was usually face-to-face meetings where that was always a barrier. You know, if we do this, would we just continue almost the virtual format so that way it'd be easy? You know, we don't want to be pulling a member out of class, you know, that'd be counterproductive, but, you know, I'm sure there'd be a remote option for them to, you know, be able to be excused from class and participate.
I will say, I know that the Children's Mental Health Grant has parents that are involved on the implementation team, and our meetings are in the evening to account for that. So I'm not saying necessarily that we switch these meetings to the evening, but that may be where we want to consider having more of like a youth advisory board, and then they meet in the evenings, and then maybe a representative, they rotate, you know, attending our meetings or something to that effect. So we're accounting for that as well.
Anything else on the youth focus groups? Okay, so we can move on to de-escalation videos.
So I met with Pam actually yesterday. She had been collecting the perspectives of youth from the detention center, not necessarily youth that had adolescent domestic battery in their backgrounds, but just kind of a general, just youth that were in the detention center. And then we were asking questions that were more about family conflict that's occurring in their home, and just kind of their perspective of what happens when the police get called out to their home, that sort of thing. So we kind of discussed the themes with Pam and I did yesterday. A lot of it was just kind of that lack of respite care, lack of place to go, that they really just needed space at that point, but not necessarily wanting it to be detention per se. And then one of the other themes that really stood out to us was that the kids were explaining some of their views on the system and their interactions with the system, which I thought, I mean, it was really, again, eye-opening from what they were saying. So it's kind of just discussing like what we want to do with next steps. I think some of it can certainly inform that de-escalation video that we're talking about. I don't know that we got like a bunch of support for a video or some, you know, that's going to be really helpful for families per se, but I think we could certainly inform the information that we're sharing based on these perspectives. But I was thinking that maybe I would take some of this discussion and bring it to the racial and ethnic disparities group that we're meeting next week, and bringing it to them and seeing if we can tie it into our conversation around how we're addressing adolescent domestic battery. That might be a space to do that. Before I move on, there's another piece to the adolescent domestic battery stuff. So is there any other comments about that meeting or the video content still being developed, because I've had other priorities. So the other thing related to adolescent domestic battery that we have available to us, or I'm sorry, that's related to adolescent domestic battery somewhat, is the state's attorney's office, in collaboration with the Family Violence Coordinating Council, is putting on a webinar for, I think it's specifically driven towards law enforcement, but it's not, anyone can attend, any professional in our community can attend. But it's really just to offer clarity around domestic violence and discussing the resources. I did confirm that they're not going to cover adolescent domestic battery because it's, a separate issue, as we've been discussing, which I think is it seems fair that we're not going to muddy the waters in that conversation. But there was support to maybe do something separate at a later time, really kind of getting into the issues of adolescent domestic battery. I just wanted to mention that as well.
Any comment or questions on any of that? Okay, so we can move on to the law enforcement training. And I would ask for a motion so that we can discuss our vote. Does the board of directors approve the drafted article Community Conundrum and any necessary revisions to be published in the Legalese newsletter on behalf of the Juvenile Justice Center? Is there a motion for us to discuss this?
I'll make a motion.
And a second?
I can second. This is Lark.
Juliet, you had some notes about that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, so this was out of our discussion at the last board of directors meeting. We talked about putting out another newsletter in the Legalese from the state's attorney's office that goes out to law enforcement. It's just another way to share information. So this one was written about the challenges of adolescent domestic battery offenses. So kind of taking a more of an outside approach and like considering all perspectives that go into them. And so the article was shared with everyone to review. So you see the content. We haven't done any revisions to it yet. So I would work with Chris Nelson from the state's attorney's office to make those necessary revisions. But the content is what I guess we would need approval for.
Any discussion on that?
I guess I have a question. In looking at it, in that second paragraph, it talks about domestic battery being one of the highest offenses. I guess I'd ask, I know Ms. Conforti's on here. And then it talks about it's the second highest reason why youth are detained. I haven't seen that since I've been here. Ms. Conforti, would you agree or disagree?
I would agree. I think the domestic batteries that we have had definitely have mental health components as opposed to, partner abuse or something to that effect. But I do not believe that those are the majority of people that are detained. I believe also that most of the domestics we've had are misdemeanors, but the issue is more complicated, and sometimes those are the more complicated cases because of the family component, the mental health. That's typically what's involved in those, in my opinion.
And if I may, Julia, can you correct me if I'm wrong? That data comes directly from the commission, correct? And that's based upon JMS data that JJC has to input when somebody is detained. What I think happens a lot of times with the domestic violence battery cases, they may not stay in detention long, but there are a lot of admissions for domestic battery. So when you look at the POP report, now I do agree with Deb that those that tend to stay longer also have some of that mental health component that leads to them not being released. But that data is coming from just admissions itself and what charge they were admitted on. Am I right, Julia?
Yes. And I will say, though, even if they're not kept in detention, looking across the data points too, again, based on like the data that we work with the commission on, but the youth that are involved in the court system, domestic battery is one of the higher offenses. But to be fair, sorry, just one more thing. To be fair, this is also based on calendar year 2019. That's the most recent data that we've taken a look at. We just submitted, is that right? We just submitted calendar year 2020. I believe. Oh, Latanya,
I'm muted. I think it's very similar again. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I don't remember seeing a lot of differences between what I submitted from 2019 to 2020.
I mean, isn't the reason for the
weren't detaining? I'm sorry, Mike. It might be a little less this year, and I think 2020 we got to take as a totally, completely different vacuum as to what the JJC allowed to be admitted. So I'll have to look to see overall numbers once they pull it all together. So 2020 may be different, but I think it will be different for different reasons, other reasons other than making changes as it relates to domestic battery.
I was going to say, isn't the main reason for the detention because the residence isn't an available placement initially? Is that what leads to the, it's not because of the seriousness of the offense, but there's nowhere else, there's no alternatives?
That's hard to say. I mean, I appreciate what you're saying. Typically they would, if the parents aren't willing to take the child home, then of course they stay. But often we find out there's so much more involved and we end up ordering psychologicals and things that do take time. But honestly, very few that I can think of misdemeanor domestic batteries are detained for very long. I think initially they, through COVID and all, the detention center was accepting all domestics, even if they were, nothing too serious. They were having them stay over until we had a hearing, as opposed to any other type of a misdemeanor case. Does that answer your question? I mean, yeah, that's part of it, but we also unravel so many other issues often on those particular minors.
Well, I guess my question was, if there's cases where the parents are willing to take the child back into the home, are there occasions where there's still detention because the determination can't be made if that's appropriate, if that's where the incident occurred?
No, I don't think so. Judge, what do you think? That's not really the issue.
I agree 100% with Ms. Conforti, and I think that is my concern with this this article. I feel like it's a little bit misleading to what is actually going on. The cases that we have where the parents are willing to take the kids back home, we do let them go home, and the state does a really good job of talking with the parents and you making sure that there aren't any safety concerns in the PD2. And if they're in agreement, that's what happens. I mean, we always want the kids to go home when they can, and we don't try to keep them here if there are not any safety concerns. But the domestic battery cases that we've seen, I would say the majority, if not all, we're talking about kids who have had some sort of a mental health episode. Yeah. That's what's triggered what has happened at home. And then that, as Ms. Conforti said, we become aware of it at the detention hearing. A parent will say something, let the attorneys know that something unusual has happened at home or just that it's completely out of character. And then we're ordering psychological evaluations. We are trying to see what services are available for treatment. That's really more the way that we go with these. And it's rare. It's very rare for a family, because that's what's triggering the domestic violence incident at home. It's very rare for those parents to not want to have the kids come home. They recognize that this is something just completely out of character and that their child needs help. And most of them are just looking for that help.
And that's why I think maybe it's a wording issue, because I think what we're trying to say is that if child domestic battery was not looked at in the same way by police jurisdictions as partner abuse domestic battery, are there ways that we can divert these families or these kids and get these issues addressed without ever having that minor put in the JJC, even for a day, overnight, afternoon, whatever the case may be? And I think that's the goal in this article. So it may be more about how we're wording the data, but I think the data further gives evidence as to we need to look at this as a whole and what can we do to potentially not even get this family that involved if we can meet their need without it.
So, and if I may, I would agree in terms of the wording. So I can certainly revise. I can see in that second paragraph, Judge, where you're talking about there could be misinterpretations of that, even just simply saying that's the second highest reason that they're detained. We can, revise that and at least clarify that that's something related more to the admission rate, if that would help alleviate some of the concern. I also want to say that part of this was written too from trying to bring in some of the law enforcement perspective, because I talked to a couple of officers, and just in general, it was a sense that these situations are challenging because they don't want to remove the kids per se, but sometimes what the statute says, they have to follow the statute and what it says. If there's a safety concern, they also have to attend to that. So just kind of recognizing the overall issue, and if it would also be helpful, I'm happy to add maybe additional context about what, once they're in the court system, what the efforts that are put into place to try to get to the bottom of it. But I think, unfortunately, we don't have a solution to this problem. But I think, like LaTanya was saying, this is kind of at least a foundation for bringing this issue to light and saying, like, we can have more of a conversation because of the challenges that it's presenting.
I don't have a problem with that concept. I think I have just concerns about just how it's worded and it reads. I mean, even if you look at the fourth paragraph, incidents of adolescent domestic violence are typically the result of a family conflict. I don't think that's true. I think that they are the result of kids who are having some sort of mental health crisis. So I just don't think it accurately reflects what I've seen.
Okay.
So I think the purpose is great. I just don't think the information's accurate.
Julia, I don't know, like, what is the deadline to submit the newsletter to the newsletter?
I think sooner than later. He's doing them quarterly, I believe. So I would assume he wants a spring edition here pretty soon, but I can work on some revisions and resubmit it to the board via email and see if that addresses the concerns that are being raised. And then we can go from there. He originally said he wanted a draft by the 1st of March, which I got him, but this is kind of where we're at.
Not to take, I mean, because I read the article, right? And I probably have the least direct exposure, other than domestic violence cases I handle in family law. The impression I got was now I'm thinking maybe the title family fights initially leads you in the wrong direction, right? Is that?
Yeah.
So do we want to table the vote to wait for revisions?
I think that's a good idea.
I
agree.
Can I clarify, Mike? What did you mean the title, family fights?
What I hear Judge Parga and Deb Conforti saying is these aren't just family fights. That's not how they're.
Responding to family fights. I got you. Okay.
Yeah, I mean it kind of starts off in that direction where the child should remain in the home, which I guess is a good goal, but it's making it seem like treating it as an adult domestic violence case requires that the child not be returned to the home. But there's no mention anywhere in the article of mental health issues, and it's making it seem like, it's just a family fight. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
And that doesn't seem to be what Judge Parga and Deb Conforti are saying.
Yeah.
I agree. And I think if your purpose is to try and find a way to divert these families out, then you really need to talk about mental health issues and the availability of mental health services, especially to kids, because it's incredibly limited. And I think any success you're going to have in diverting those families out has to seriously involve looking at what is available to kids in this area and trying to figure out a way to increase those services to the families and the kids, because when we see them, they're looking at us as their last resource. They don't know where else to turn, what help to get. They're at their wit's end, and it's again about what's out there in the community to treat these kids, and there's not a lot out there.
Right.
Okay.
If I may, this is Mike Frieders with Geneva PD. I think though, you do have to take into account the target audience of what you're looking to address the article to is law enforcement. So while I don't disagree of a mental health component, I think it's really a cornucopia of issues that what the officers are seeing. It's mental health, it's substance abuse. Quite often it might be just poor parenting. There's all kinds of deeper issues. So I do agree with that. But at the crux of it, if the officer has to make the arrest, that's where they're really struggling. And I think the article does a good job of capturing what is that difficult position.
I feel like a lot of the cases, the more complicated cases, I feel like the officers do an exceptional job on trying to stabilize the situation. They don't. What I have seen often is that finally, when there is an arrest, it's often after several trips to that home where the officers have just tried to help the family in other ways, and then finally, they're like Judge said, they're at their wits' end and they say take her or take him, because I honestly have seen officers tell me that they have been there, 10 times already in the last couple of months for the same issue. And finally, that's when their parents are at the wit's end and they're like, there's so much going on with the child. And that's when they come into our detention center, right? Would you agree, Judge, on that? I mean, I've seen officers do a fabulous job on just trying to help the kid before they ever take them in, if they have to.
I agree 100%. I think the officers do a really good job of, doing what they can to keep the families and the kids out. But I think, again, at the end of the day, whether it's mental health, whether it's drugs, there's not a lot of resources, even for the officers to direct families to. And then you need to have parents who are proactive enough, aware enough, educated enough to reach out for those services and get that help. And they're dealing with their own issues, whether they're unemployed, whether they're underemployed, food issues, housing issues. So this ends up being the straw that breaks the camel's back, because it's just it's one more thing on their plate and they just can't anymore.
Right. So I think originally we started this because we were looking at the people that are detained, and I agree that it's definitely not the domestic batteries that stay here. Maybe initially they come in because they're at that point.
But while we were talking, I did take a look at the data for 2020, and domestic battery is the top offense again. And that you got to remember, this is just admission, not how long they stay, just the initial admission, what was the charge for, and domestic battery was the highest offense in 2020 again.
Surprises me, because I feel like we don't have that many of those cases, Ms. Conforti.
Yeah. Our top 10 are domestic battery, aggravated battery, UUW, UPCS, mob action.
So those aren't aggravated battery isn't
the 10s.
Right. So I think during COVID and all, sometimes a domestic would come in and it was so really minimal, at the time. It looked very minimal, and we were all surprised, like, why are they here? Why are they here? We were never asking them to stay. We talked to the parents, they want them home. So maybe that's why the numbers are a little skewed. We let them out right away,
right?
Unless it's something more complicated. But I still feel like the biggest detention cases are those with guns and shootings, right, Judge? I mean,
it's not, when you look at the overall admissions, the offense itself, what they were charged with, those are actually don't really necessarily make the top 10. Those are the ones that stay.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I think we always think about the ones that stay and the ones that's there, and they're there for the serious offenses. But when you look at all the admissions for the entire year, what were those charges? Is domestic battery, aggravated battery, UUW. UPCS are your top 5 out of the 10. And that's I got that data directly from the JJC and GMS.
Okay.
So even beyond that, it seems like we still, the consensus maybe seems to be to have some revisions to the article before we take a vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I don't, maybe somebody can help me. Do I have to have a vote to table it?
I don't know.
Well, maybe we'll just do a vote anyway, just to be,
I think you need a motion to table it.
yes.
I'll make a motion to table the motion.
Thank you, Mike. So do I have a motion to table the vote at this time to, for Julia to draft some revisions and re-present?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. And is there a second?
I would second
Mike
it.
Frieders, I'll second it.
Oh, okay.
So all in favor of tabling it?
Aye.
Aye.
And
Aye.
any opposed? Okay, so we will table this issue and discuss it at a later time then. All right, so we can move on. Julie, did you want to talk about strategies for youth?
Yeah, I just, I know we kind of talked about it at the last meeting. We didn't talk about any action to come on it. I don't know if the members feel like one way or the other on the strategies for youth training, or if we just need to let go of it. Do we need a vote to decline the opportunity? I think we had just kind of left it hanging out there. So I can let it go and just let it continue to hang out there, or if we want to formally like terminate this discussion, that's fine too.
Any comments or questions about strategies for youth? So Julia had suggested an email vote to decline it. I will look into that, and then if that is necessary, then we can send out an email vote in regards to that. Then we can move on to parent engagement, and there is nothing new to report on that at this time. So we will move on to restorative practices, which we have 2 votes here. I would ask for a motion to discuss the vote of approving funding to offer a training of trainers for the introduction of restorative practices, effective use of circles through the International Institute of Restorative Practices. So is there a motion to discuss this item?
I would make the motion then.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there, and Julia, you had a little bit you wanted to say on this?
Yeah, this is just the subcommittee had requested a training of trainers. We can have 10 people attend this training of trainers. So this is to get 10 people trained to be able to offer this training throughout the community. It would be virtual, so there is no travel cost. So this is just the total cost, and that proposal was distributed to everyone.
And just as a reminder, the total cost was $10,350.
And just from my own understanding, Julie, this is training to train someone to be able to do the restorative practices, not them actually doing the circles, correct? This is training them to be certified to be able to do the circles.
So they would have had to have gone through the introduction to restorative practices and effective use of circles training itself as a prerequisite. And so now this is the training of trainers where they can now offer that training to other people. So they should already know how to do that. And then this is just training them to train how.
And in the MOU, they're agreeing to do more train the trainers. So we have more people that's able to train other people in restorative practices.
They're agreeing to do more of just the introductory trainings, not the trainer of trainers, because they can't, but yes, the introductory trainings, yes.
Well, how many sessions are they? Or how long are they? I mean, I'm new to this. It sounds kind of high to me when there's no travel or anything. I don't know.
So the training of trainers is a week-long training because it's offered virtually. Usually it's only 3 days. But once they're trained, then they can offer a 2-day training to staff members or to professionals or to anyone really that wants to be trained in the first 2 days of this training. So the introduction of restorative practices and effective use of circles, that's the title of the 2-day training. Our school districts are they've really kind of been using the IRP framework and curriculum. So it's supportive of what they're trying to do in terms of implementing restorative practices. They've been asking for this. So the subcommittee is made up of some partners from school districts as well as some other community partners. But that, yeah, it is a lot of money, but I want to say we've done it before. And that's why the MOU is there, is so that we can have that sustainability piece. Because unfortunately, after we did it the first time, attrition happened and we lost a lot of our trainers.
How did you come up with that number, or is that something that's previously been given to everybody? Again, I'm first time here, so I don't know. I just don't know where you came up with that number.
It's from the proposal from the International Institute of Restorative Practices. It's their fee that they charge. So I sent that proposal out with the materials.
Yeah.
Did you?
I think I just have, yeah, I do have the proposal, but again, it's not delineated. It just says $10,350. I don't know what that means.
Well, it's their staff that's providing the training.
So is it just for one person? On the proposal, it says quantity 1.
No, that's quantity 1 training of trainers, I assume, but it's for 10 people to become trained.
Any further discussion? All right, so we can put it to a vote then. Does the Board of Directors approve funding of $10,350 for the training of the trainers? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay.
How about on the fence? I just don't know enough about it, so I'd rather not vote on that, honestly.
Okay. You can abstain.
Abstain.
So then it appears that that the vote did pass. So we can approve the funding, which brings us to the second portion of it. If we could have a motion to discuss the board approving the drafted MOU for the participants attending to sign. Is there a motion to have discussion?
I'll make a motion to discuss the MOU.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
So we can open it to discussion. Any questions or comments on that? Oh, Julie, you did have a little bit you wanted to say too.
This was just the votes kind of built on each other. So if we were moving forward with that training of trainers, then this MOU would be signed by those attending. So the 10 people to show their commitment, because we are putting out that 10 grand for them to get trained.
Any discussion on this?
Can I just ask a question? Let's say somebody is one of the 10 that gets trained and they're ready, willing, and able to participate in, training within Kane County going forward. Is there a time period where their training lapses or they have to be retrained, or is there a certain number of trainings you have to do in order to maintain the certification?
No, historically they had a trainer license that you'd have to uphold, but they have removed that requirement. So I've asked kind of what that means, and I'm waiting for clarification on that. The IRP does track, like they have a system where you have to submit a training proposal if you're going to do a training as one of their trainers. I don't know if, since they've removed that licensure agreement piece, if they've removed that requirement as well, but that was their way to be able to say, to see how long it's been since you've done a training. And if it had been some time, then they would say like, oh, let's go over, a couple sections, or let's make sure that you're doing okay. So they kind of did it informally, but there's no requirement for how many you have to do or a time frame on your license.
Is there any further discussion? So we can,
Sorry, one area that I might be difficult is the facilitate one training outside of the organization. I think my only worry would be contractual time with, let's say, a school district. Would they then have to take personal days off during the summer in order to do a training outside of, let's say, their organization? So, I mean, can we at least make that potentially flexible? Or does the group want to make sure that's in essence like a mandate?
I will say I didn't just make that up. I got that from a school district that they thought that was reasonable, but that was one school district. So there's 8 others, So
Josh, are you saying that they'll agree to do a training, but it doesn't have to be outside of their school hours is your concern?
Yeah, so I don't want to have it where somebody is, let's say, penalized by their employer because if they're doing it during workday hours, and then they're gonna have to take personal time, like they're 2 weeks off or that they have for vacation to provide, a 2-day training. I don't want that to be a barrier for somebody per se.
So I asked, my question to the school district that I spoke with was, would it be reasonable for in selecting the people that you're selecting to attend this training, would it be reasonable to ask them for a one-time, like 2-day training so they can offer it out into the community, and then the district would then ensure that there's staff to cover whatever needs to be covered that day. But I think it was without penalizing them with their PTO time or whatever it's called.
Well, I think the reason to include it is how else do we get the spread we need across all the school districts in the county? If they we pay for the training and then they're only expanding the training within their school district, we don't get the cross spread that we were looking for from the investment.
I agree completely with Mike. I think we need to let them.
The Regional Office of Education can help the school districts coordinate that so they're not one school district is carrying the load for the rest of them.
Right now we're trying to get them back in school.
any further discussion on this? Okay. So we can put it to a vote. Does the board of directors approve the drafted MOU for participants attending the trainer of trainer? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. Okay, so that is passed then, and we will use the MOU for the participants to sign. So we are moving on to next item, which is resource holder. There is a meeting set for this for March 24th at 12 p.m. for the committee, for the people of the committee that volunteered. If anyone has any ideas or resources that they want to be included, please make sure to get that to Julia prior to the meeting. And we are moving on to racial and ethnic disparities. Julia?
So I met with, I think last time when we left off, I was supposed to have a meeting with the center at the University of Illinois who helps with the data for the commission. So I met with them, and they're coordinating a presentation for us. We just need to kind of decide on a time, maybe in April or May, that we can host this presentation. It'd be virtual. We talked about having it recorded as well. So like I said, we just need to kind of narrow down a time frame, and then we can send out an email vote to get that approved. So this, just for reference for of what this is. So the commission helps us with our data. We provide, Core Services provides data to them as well. So this is an opportunity to have some further discussion and really take a look at our data. And we've been kind of talking about this over the past couple of meetings. So again, this is just trying to narrow down that time frame. So I don't know if there's a day in like April or May that's ideal, or a week maybe, or a couple dates, or how we want to pick.
I'll just say for me, Thursdays are difficult. We have a lot of internal meetings, and then as Rochelle knows, there's judicial public safety. It's a lot goes on Thursdays. So even if it's Lisa attending and not me, I would say try to stay away for Thursdays for us.
I would wholeheartedly agree with that.
I would also say not on a Monday, just to get caught up from the weekend or whatever. So maybe middle of the week, Tuesday or Wednesday.
And I'm assuming like a lunch hour would be best for court schedules.
Yeah, probably. Yep.
I know if you're looking into May 5th is a time where you might have some of your state's attorneys not available because of Pew. So I'm just trying to, so that's a Wednesday I would maybe stay away from because of that. And then I would stay away from April 14th because we got juvenile systems players. That's also a Wednesday. Because you're trying to come up with days. Those are just the ones that I can see on my calendar.
Okay.
So it sounds like, Julia, you can, some ideas that you can pick a date and then put it out to an email vote?
Sure.
Okay, sounds good.
You want me to keep going on the other items?
Yes.
So I already mentioned that we have our committee meeting for racial and ethnic disparities next Friday. We'll probably take a look at that law enforcement data that we collected back in January. I do also want to say that the same office that's doing the data presentation for us, they have a domestic violence specific presentation. And I'm like trying to refresh my memory on what this was around, but I forget who they surveyed, but they did these surveys where they took domestic violence scenarios and kind of changed them up based on demographics. And then they kind of assessed like the biases that went into looking at those scenarios, but I can't remember who they surveyed. But that has been offered by it's the Center for Prevention Research and Development or something like that at the University of Illinois as another piece of the presentation. So they offered to do it as part of that data presentation that we were just talking about, but I was kind of like, it may be more beneficial or maybe of interest if we just kind of do a separate presentation or take a look at that and maybe even take a look at our data related to domestic battery to kind of have that conversation. But I wanted to offer that to the board as well.
Any comments or questions on that? Does it sound like something we would be interested in? So maybe, Julia, we can talk about that a little bit more for next time.
Sure.
Okay. And your last item under this?
Oh, I covered that one. Just the committee.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine.
So then the final, a couple left of old business. Julia is continuing to do the individual meetings. Julia, did you want to talk about how many have you done or where you at in them?
I think I've done 5. So slower moving, but I mean, there's lots of moving parts right now. So it's a good thing that I'm slowing. I don't know. It's bittersweet that I'm slowing down. So, but they, like I said, at the last meeting, they've been really helpful. So I definitely want to continue them. I just, it's been slower this last month.
Okay. And then on our current expenditures, still looking for ways to spend money. So Julia pointed out that maybe some of our, after we have our resource holders meeting, there may be some needs for some funds to go that way, or the restorative practices training as well. So a couple of ideas, but still looking for other ways if anyone has ideas and wants to pass those on to Julia. And then the final old business is the book club. And this is just follow up on conversations that we've had in the past, whether there is any interest in us facilitating that. I don't know, Julia, did you want to add anything to that?
No, and I'm like keeping an eye on time, so I'm thinking we can also table this discussion for a little bit further at the next meeting, because I do want to get to the grant priorities and the proposed research study piece.
Okay, then we will move on to new business. And the first is the fiscal year 2022 grant opportunities. Julia?
So we're just expecting our grant application to be posted soon, hopefully. I'm hoping at least by the end of the month. So if there's any priorities or things that you feel like need to be included in that grant application, I guess I would just open that invitation to send it my way so that we can start getting prepared. As we know, this is the time that it always comes. So just want to put that out there.
And then Josh was going to talk.
Yeah, I'm going to put Josh on the spot for this proposed research study if I can.
All right, perfect. So Julia, fill me in if I'm missing any spots.
Sure.
As we talked about a lot over the time, a lot of research regarding juvenile justice involvement has really been through school expulsions and suspensions. In my time on drug court, and we had a juvenile drug court, I was always able to look back at student records, and there was this theme always coming up of early absenteeism rates in elementary school. And it's something that I kind of brought to Julia saying, hey, is there something here? Do you know of anything? And she said no. And so we reached out to Dr. Patricia Graysick at UIC, who is one of the leading authorities in the world regarding attendance and absenteeism. And I asked her, do you know of any research regarding early absenteeism rate in juvenile justice involvement? And she said, no, she doesn't know of any research studies. And so when I started digging through some of the data, Julia shared with you some of the school district data, but I was seeing elementary absenteeism rates, and chronic absenteeism is when a student misses 18 days or more during a school year. And this data was from last year, and so it was only 3/4 of a school year. But I was seeing elementary school, one subgroup, African-American students, 76% of African-American students at this elementary school in Elgin missed 18 days or more. A lot of our districts, students with disabilities, mental health related disabilities are missing double digits. And so it's something I want to propose to the group is this an avenue we want to go down, looking at those early absenteeism rates? And, if we don't interject ourselves with interventions at a earlier level, at the elementary level, does it lead to potential further juvenile justice involvement?
Well, I would say, I guess I would like, I don't know how much you're going back in research, but over the last 10 years, as far as the police aspect, and I'm not saying write everybody tickets and bring everybody into court, but we don't write truancy tickets anymore. I used to write them all the time. And then I would write them and it was only for like excessive 5 to 10 absences. I wouldn't write one, a kid missed one day, I'm not writing a ticket. And then we used to even write parents. If the parents were, allowing it, then we would write the parents too. And I know it's coming into court, and I know that's something that the vibe is kind of away from that. And I know the ROE kind of handles that now. But I'd be interested to see, like, is truancy even worse? I know you're making the correlation, is there an effect later? But I'm wondering and I'm not saying, let's start writing tickets, but it just seems like, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, like this is all just kind of referred to the school and ROE, and we really don't have any kind of issue with it. You know what I mean, on our end.
It is, and the area we really want to look at, is the absenteeism, both excused and unexcused days. And even during our meeting today, how many times that have come up, there's mental health issues with juveniles, there's other family issues going on, and so many times that first symptom is the student not showing up to school. As I stated, like, there is no research out there that I could find, and I spent probably a couple days trying to look at it to show, like, attendance is potentially a gateway to further court involvement.
Mhm,
And like
mhm.
I said, my time on drug court, I looked at one school district. I'm anecdotally putting together my own little research study, and out of those 10 students involved, every single one of them in 3rd grade was missing over 20 to 30 days. Does it mean they're going to end up in court? No, but does it put you at a higher risk?
Yeah.
Probably so.
Mhm.
And so that's why I just wanted to kind of pitch it to the group. It's definitely something I'm passionate about, but I think it'd be really cool to see a research study to look at this. And, is this an early symptom of potential involvement?
And then I guess like, well, what is it DCFS call? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what, how do we get that parent, I mean, you're talking elementary, it's not the kid's fault, I would argue. You know what I mean? Like, so, I mean, I guess the end result is, what are we going to do about it? You know what I mean? I guess, and again, I'm not saying let's write tickets and bring them to court and fine them and all that. But I guess in that case, how do we get, parents to comply and understand what's going on, I guess.
And I think when, Julie and I have kind of met with Dr. Graysick to talk about this, with her expertise in doing research, we'd almost frame it with juveniles currently involved in the system, and then looking through releases and going through the different authorities we'd have to go through to approve this, to look at and go back to those early elementary years to look at their attendance, if there's a pattern. And I asked her up front, is there going to be any way to distinguish it's Kane County or stuff like that? And it would be very non-descriptive. A Midwest town, here are the demographics, here are the makeups, going through that. In my ultimate goal is being able to provide some of this data back to the school districts, if the study's conducted, to say, what we do at an early level, let's say kindergarten, if a student's missing 10 days in kindergarten, not really a major deal, but to me that is high risk, and so it's being able to quantify to some of our partners. Sure, they're not, breaking into cars, or even the justice system might not be so involved, with them or worried, but this is really risky behaviors. Maybe we could focus more attention those early prevention levels early on, rather than when they get into the system, it takes a lot more work per se.
Yeah, like an early warning system, the alerts, hey, maybe reach out, they miss 5 days in a month or something, hey, maybe a phone call, reach out, like an early warning system. No, I understand. Okay.
It seems like every study that ever gets done on a particular topic leads to the conclusion that something happened early on in a child's life, which led to them being involved in the juvenile justice system, whether it's diet and nutrition or ACE or whatever. So obviously you're on the right track here. I mean, you could almost assume that increased truancy leads to involvement in the juvenile justice system. I mean, I'm sure research could confirm it, but it's almost like there should be a statistical tracking, some way to track the data. Whereas if at kindergarten to 1st grade, if they have 10 absences in kindergarten and then 12 in 1st grade, boom, intervene, regardless of, we don't even know what the reason are, but there should be kind of an automatic intervention at that, as early as 1st grade. I mean, I'm sure if you even went back further, you'd see how many of the kids that are having absences in kindergarten, how many of them actually went to preschool. I'm sure if you said, if we had universal preschool, you'd probably have better attendance rates starting in kindergarten through elementary school. I mean, you could take it back all the way to age 3, probably.
I think it's an interesting topic. You got all big picture people on this call. So, we're already kind of thinking, what do you do with it once you get the information, and how do you deal with the prevention? But it's actually pretty timely, because you can tell that there's a discussion around this, because there's legislation in Illinois, I think, that's got proposed, I want to say yesterday, a couple of days ago, looking at mental health and whether or not when a parent calls a minor in because of mental health concerns, that those should be an excused absence. And in some ways, I absolutely get it. But then the question is, okay, does that then trigger maybe that school social worker if we've got somebody with 5, 10 absences, is now that school social worker reaching out to that family to address some of those issues and maybe get them to help at an earlier age than when they're older and all of that. So I think it's an interesting topic. The question is going to be, what do you do with the information once we get it?
Anything else on that? Okay, so we're getting over our time. Julia, 2 more items?
I was going to say, if we want to, I mean, I can send it out via email if
Okay.
we want to be mindful of everyone's time.
Okay, maybe we should do that because we're over our time now. Is there anything else that anyone wanted to discuss? Any other updates? Okay, then if we could have a motion to adjourn
Motion made.
Motion.
in a second.
I'll second.
All right, then it is 1:02 and we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.